Why did the armory go silent when the crack of plastic echoed through the concrete room? It wasn't the sound of a rifle firing. It was the sound of one breaking. And everyone knew who had caused it. Staff Sergeant Dwight Keller stood over Lieutenant Ree Carver's M4, holding it like a butcher inspecting a cut of meat. He turned it over, smirk tugging the edge of his mouth, voice loud enough to carry through the crowded armory. "You sure this'll pass inspection, Lieutenant?" He didn't ask because he cared. He asked because he wanted an audience. Around them, soldiers cleaned their weapons, checked optics, wiped down barrels. But every motion slowed as Keller kept talking. 78% first-time qualification rate this month, even for experienced shooters. You sure you're ready for that? He twisted the rifle in his hands, pretending to study the sight alignment. Ree's voice was steady, even. The rifle zeroed Staff Sergeant. "I'll qualify." It was simple, flat, a statement of fact. But Keller's expression sharpened like a blade finding its edge. His fingers found the carry handle mount, and before anyone could react, crack! The polymer fractured with a sharp, brutal sound. The armory froze. "Oh, look at that," Keller said, his tone mock casual. "Defective equipment." He handed the rifle back to her, the handle assembly hanging loose, twisted, useless. "Guess you'll need to withdraw from qualification. Can't shoot with damaged gear. Regulations, you know." The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was suffocating. Ree stared at the broken weapon in her hands, the weight of it, the absurdity, the deliberate humiliation. Then she looked up. Her tone didn't change, but her words cut through the air like a clean shot. "Mind if I borrow yours instead, Staff Sergeant?" 3 full seconds passed, nobody breathed. Keller blinked once, twice, as if he hadn't heard her correctly. Then the smirk returned, thin and cold. "You want to borrow my rifle for qualification?" "Yes, Staff Sergeant." Behind her, someone whispered, "This is gonna be ugly." A quiet laugh followed. $10 says she doesn't make it past the first mag. Keller unslung his M4, the same one he'd carried through multiple deployments, custom grip, slightly heavier trigger pull, tuned to his liking. He'd spent months refining its feel, its balance. He held it out, but when she reached for it, he didn't let go right away. "When you fail," he said softly, "everyone's gonna know it wasn't the equipment. It was you." Ree didn't blink. "I understand, Staff Sergeant." Then he released the weapon. At that exact moment, the armory doors swung open. Major Hayward stepped inside. His boots hit concrete like punctuation marks. "What's the situation?" Keller straightened instantly. "Lieutenant Carver's rifle malfunctioned, sir. She's requested to use mine for today's qualification." Hayward's eyes shifted from Keller to Ree, then to the broken rifle, then back to her again. "That true, Lieutenant?" "Yes, sir." "You understand that's highly irregular?" "Yes, sir. I'd still like to qualify today." The major studied her, his jaw flexed once. "Range time, at 900, don't be late." Then he turned and walked out. The moment the door shut, the noise returned, the low hum of whispered commentary, nervous laughter, and the metallic clack of weapons being reassembled. Ree ignored it all. She began checking the borrowed rifle, Keller's rifle, with surgical precision. Chamber, bolt carrier, trigger, barrel. The weapon was immaculate, every component polished, every motion familiar to its owner. But it wasn't hers. Its balance was off, its feel alien. Technical Sergeant Voss, a graying veteran who'd seen more ranges than some soldiers had birthdays, stepped closer. His tone was quiet, not mocking, just matter-of-fact. "Heavier trigger pull than standard issue. Keller likes it that way." Ree nodded once. "Understood." That was all she said. As she continued her inspection, Private Chun drifted closer, carrying his own cleaning kit like an excuse to linger. He didn't quite look at her when he spoke. "Ma'am, just so you know, word's spreading. Half the battalion's coming to watch." She didn't answer. Didn't need to. Because deep down she already knew this wasn't just about qualification anymore. It was theater, and she was the unwilling lead. Keller appeared again at her shoulder, folding his arms. "You've got 30 minutes until we move to the range, Lieutenant. Might want to get some dry fire in. Not that it'll help much." He tilted his head slightly, pretending sympathy. "You can still withdraw. No shame in recognizing when you're set up to fail." Ree raised the rifle, brought it to her shoulder. The stock felt different, longer, harder against her cheek. Through the sight window across the armory, she could see the distant glint of targets in the morning sun. She lowered it, met his eyes, and said, "I'll see you at the range, Staff Sergeant." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, Lieutenant, you will." The rifle range was alive before 900. 200 meters of dry earth and gravel shimmered under the rising sun. Targets stood at staggered distances, 50, 100, 200, 300 meters, each one a silent challenge. Word had traveled faster than radio signals. By the time Ree stepped onto the line, at least 40 soldiers were watching from behind the safety barrier, more than double the usual number. Every face seemed to carry the same expectation. She's going to fail. Corporal Hayes muttered to Private Lynn, "She's using someone else's zero. You can't hit anything like that." Technical Sergeant Voss positioned himself near the firing line with a spotting scope. His expression neutral, his voice roughened by years of shouting through wind and gunfire. "You understand, Lieutenant, unzeroed rifle scores are still official." "Yes, Sergeant." He nodded. "Good, one attempt, no alibis." Keller stood a few meters back, arms crossed again, face unreadable. Major Hayward appeared behind him, silent observer. The range master, Gunnery Sergeant Briggs, took his place in the tower. His voice carried across the field. "Lieutenant Carver, 40 rounds, 4 positions. Minimum 23 hits to qualify. Marksman, 23. Sharpshooter, 33. Expert, 38. He looked at her directly. "You may fire when ready." Ree went prone at the 50-meter line. The ground was cold against her elbows. She breathed once, twice, steady. The rifle felt heavier than it should. Different recoil balance, different pull tension. But a rifle is a language, and she'd spent her life learning dialects. She exhaled halfway. Held. Squeezed. The shot cracked through the morning stillness. Voss's voice came through the air. "Hit, center mass." Second shot hit, third hit. Each one deliberate, calm, patient. When the 10th round fired, the murmurs behind her had changed tone. "10 for 10, Hayes whispered. "Yeah, but that's the easy one." "Next position." Ree shifted to kneeling. 100 meters. The target smaller, the angle steeper. She adjusted her body, found balance. Each shot rolled out like breath, measured, unfaltering. "Hit, hit, hit," Voss called, his tone mechanical, but there was something else behind it now. Something like quiet respect. 20 rounds, 20 hits. The crowd's noise faded entirely. When she rose to standing at 200 meters, nobody was talking, not even Keller. Ree's body swayed slightly, correcting micro-tremors. The weight of the rifle pulled at her arms, the air buzzed with tension. The target felt impossibly small. But she'd been here before, in wind, in heat, with a rifle too heavy for her small shoulders. Her father's voice still echoed from years ago. "Don't fight the rifle. Learn it. Let it teach you." She did. Shot by shot, she learned Keller's rifle, its rhythm, its pulse, its imperfections. Hit, center mass. Hit, upper thorax. Hit. 30 shots, 30 hits. The crowd no longer whispered, they simply stared. Keller's arms unfolded. His expression cracked for the first time, not anger but disbelief. The final stage, 300 meters. Ree dropped to prone. The world stretched before her, heat shimmer rising off the gravel, the target barely a blur against the horizon. She breathed slow, aligning through distortion. "Shooter ready," Briggs called. "You may fire when ready." The first shot snapped. Voss waited a heartbeat before speaking. "Hit center mass." Behind the barrier, someone exhaled sharply. Second shot hit. Third hit. Fourth hit. By the seventh, Keller's knuckles were white on the railing. By the ninth, Major Hayward was standing straighter, his eyes locked on the range. The 10th, the final shot lingered longer than all the others. The wind shifted, flags snapping left. Recompensated, adjusting barely an inch. Then she fired. The silence lasted 2 seconds, 3. Then Voss spoke, his voice rough, reverent. "Hit center mass." Briggs raised his megaphone. Qualification complete. 40 rounds fired, 40 impacts, perfect score. For 5 seconds, nobody moved. Then one pair of hands clapped, then another. Within moments, the sound spread like gunfire, 40 soldiers applauding. Ree stood, made her weapon safe, and carried it back to the ready line. No grin, no dramatics, just the calm professionalism of someone who knew what she'd done. Major Hayward met her halfway. Outstanding shooting, Lieutenant, and with a borrowed weapon no less. He didn't need to say the rest, everyone understood it. Behind him, Keller stood frozen, face pale, eyes hollowed of all arrogance. She handed his rifle back to him carefully, her voice steady. "Your weapon performs well, Staff Sergeant. You maintain it to high standards." It wasn't triumph. It was grace. And it landed harder than any insult could have. Sometimes dignity doesn't shout. It just breathes, steadies its aim, and hits every single target. Why did the man who tried to humiliate her now stand silent in the aftermath of her perfection? Staff Sergeant Dwight Keller hadn't moved since the last shot. His hands still gripped the safety barrier, his eyes fixed on the distant targets as if maybe, just maybe, one of them might suddenly prove her wrong. But none did. 40 rounds, 40 hits. Behind him, the sound of applause still echoed across the rifle range. But for Keller, it was white noise, the sound of something breaking inside him. Not a rifle this time. Pride. Ree Carver walked past him carrying the weapon he'd once called mine, her movements calm, controlled. She didn't glance in his direction. Didn't need to. Everyone already had. Major Hayward was still standing near the range tower when she approached, his posture precise, his tone unreadable. "Lieutenant," he said quietly, "you just made battalion history." Ree met his eyes, her voice professional. "Thank you, sir." Hayward's gaze shifted briefly toward Keller, with a borrowed weapon. He let the sentence linger, not to praise her, but to let every observer absorb the fact. Hayward gave a single nod. "Outstanding performance. Return to the armory, Lieutenant. Debrief in 1 hour." "Yes, sir." The walk back to the armory felt different this time. Not triumphant, not victorious, just heavier. Every pair of eyes she passed carried something: respect, disbelief, curiosity. But none of that mattered to her right now. She'd fired 40 perfect shots, but every one of them had been loaded with something heavier than ammunition. Expectation, judgment, pride. Inside the armory, the temperature felt cooler. Shadows stretched across the concrete floor, softening the hard lines of lockers and benches. She set Keller's rifle on the cleaning mat with the same care she used for her own. The barrel still warm, the metal still holding faint traces of cordite and heat. Technical Sergeant Voss entered a few moments later, his expression somewhere between astonishment and approval. "In 15 years running that range," he said, setting down his spotting scope, "I've seen maybe 6 perfect scores." He paused, his voice lowering. 2 of those were with the shooter's own rifle. None were with a borrowed one. Ree didn't look up. She was field stripping the weapon, methodical, quiet. Good equipment, she said softly. It performed the way it was built, too. Voss's eyes narrowed slightly, reading between the lines. She wasn't bragging. She was protecting the dignity of the same man who had tried to strip hers away. That said something. He nodded once. That's one way to look at it. Other soldiers drifted into the armory, trying to act casual. Private Chun lingered near the bench, pretending to inventory supplies. Corporal Hayes moved slower than usual, his gaze flicking toward her more than toward his work. Someone whispered, "She went 40 for 40, and the whisper spread like wind through dry grass. Ree ignored it all. She focused on her hands, the rhythm of cleaning, the familiar ritual that grounded her. The door opened again. Keller. The noise level dropped instantly. He walked across the room with the careful stiffness of a man approaching something dangerous. His eyes went from the rifle, disassembled, cleaned, laid out with precision, to the woman who'd used it better than he ever had. Lieutenant. Staff Sergeant. A long silence. That was, he stopped, tried again. That was exceptional shooting. She nodded once, eyes still on the weapon. Thank you, Staff Sergeant. He shifted his weight. You planning to keep using my rifle for future qualifications? She looked up now, meeting his eyes directly. No, Staff Sergeant. I'll have mine repaired, unless there's a reason it shouldn't be. The words were polite, but the message was. Keller's jaw flexed once. No reason. I'll make sure supply gets you a new component today. Appreciated. He hesitated again. The silence that followed stretched long enough that several soldiers pretended to busy themselves, though none of them actually left. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its arrogance. I made assumptions, he said. About your capability level, they were incorrect. Ree nodded once, calm, controlled. Understood. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was closure. He stood there for another second, his mouth tightening slightly before he turned and walked toward the door. His boots echoed once, twice, then faded. The armory exhaled. Hayes leaned toward Private Lynn and whispered, Did that just happen? Lynn shook his head slowly. I heard it, still don't believe it. The sun had climbed high enough to burn white heat into the air when Technical Sergeant Voss called out from the supply cage. Lieutenant Carver, Major Hayward wants to see you in his office. 15 minutes. Understood. The armory fell quiet again as she reassembled Keller's rifle, bolt carrier, trigger group, dust cover, every piece locking back into place with mechanical precision. When she finished, she set the weapon down gently, ready for return. As she walked out, soldiers parted unconsciously to make way. It wasn't rank that made them do it. It was respect. Major Hayward's office sat at the far end of the company headquarters, a small, functional space lined with plaques, maps, and a single framed photo of a family long unseen. He didn't waste time when she entered. Sit down, Lieutenant. Ree obeyed, posture straight. Hayward folded his hands on the desk, studying her. I just spoke with Gunnery Sergeant Briggs. He forwarded me your qualification score. Yes, sir. Perfect score, with another soldier's weapon, under deliberate interference. Ree said nothing. The silence was answer enough. Hayward leaned back slightly, fingers steepled. Let be direct. Staff Sergeant Keller deliberately damaged your rifle. Multiple witnesses confirmed it. She didn't flinch. Yes, sir. That's destruction of military property and interference with required training. Yes, sir. He studied her face for a moment longer. You don't seem angry. I'm focused, sir. Hayward's expression softened slightly. Good answer. He opened a folder. I'm initiating a formal investigation into Keller's actions. You'll need to provide a written statement. Understood. He closed the file. Now, let's talk about what comes next. Ree waited silent. Hayward turned his monitor slightly. A spreadsheet filled the screen. Names, scores, dates. These are every qualification result in this battalion for the past 18 months. Out of 473, we've had 8 perfect scores. He paused. You just became number 9. He leaned forward, his tone quiet but pointed. What makes yours different is that you achieved it with the wrong weapon, under psychological pressure, in front of an audience that expected you to fail. Her throat tightened slightly, but she kept her voice steady. I had prior competition experience before joining the Army, sir. My father ran a shooting range in Montana. I grew up learning fundamentals early. Hayward nodded slowly. That explains the technique, but not the composure. He tapped the desk once with his index finger. I'm entering you in the battalion marksmanship competition. Ree blinked once, sir. This isn't a request, it's an assignment. Hayward's voice carried weight now, the tone of command, not conversation. You'll represent this company 6 weeks from now. You'll train full-time until then. She processed that. 6 weeks of dedicated marksmanship training meant reassignment from her logistics duties, an unusual decision. Yes, sir. Hayward stood, packing slowly to the window. This battalion has never won the competition. 2nd Battalion takes it every year. They've got a shooter, Sergeant First Class Brennan, 3-time champion, never lost. He turned, eyes sharp now. I want that to change, and I want you to be the reason. Ree hesitated. Sir, Sergeant Brennan has 16 years of experience. Then you'll train until experience doesn't matter. He returned to his desk, pulled a paper from a folder, a training schedule neatly typed. You'll work with Technical Sergeant Voss and Master Sergeant Clayton from the division shooting team. Starting Monday, 600 daily, no other duties. Ree absorbed every word, the reality settling in like weight across her shoulders. Hayward's tone shifted slightly, quieter now. Lieutenant, what happened today isn't just about a rifle. Some people in this battalion still think women don't belong in combat roles. You didn't lecture them. You didn't argue. You just hit 40 out of 40. He paused. That kind of proof is harder to ignore than words. Ree's jaw tightened slightly. Understood, sir. Good. Hayward straightened, extending his hand. Then make sure 6 weeks from now, no one forgets what happened today. She shook his hand firmly. Yes, sir. Dismissed. Outside, the hallway was empty and quiet. For a moment, she just stood there motionless, the weight of the conversation settling in. The investigation into Keller, the reassignment, the competition. Her life had changed course in less than 8 hours. Morning, she'd walked into the armory with a rifle. Afternoon, she'd walked out with a mission. When she reached the armory again, Voss was there, paperwork spread across his desk. He looked up as she knocked. Lieutenant, how'd it go? Major Hayward's entering me in the battalion competition. 6 weeks, full-time training. Voss smiled slightly, the lines in his weathered face deepening. Good. He told me you'd be one of my students. We'll get started Monday. He pulled out a folder, tapping the cover. This is your training plan. Unknown distance, moving targets, stress fire, night ops. 6 days a week, 600 sharp. Ree accepted it, flipping through the pages. The schedule was brutal. Hours of repetition, physical conditioning, precision drills. Voss watched her reaction. You ready for that? Yes, Sergeant. Good. He leaned back slightly, a spark of respect in his eyes. Because Sergeant Brennan doesn't lose. Ree closed the folder, her voice calm. Then he hasn't faced me yet. That night, her barracks room was silent, except for the distant rhythm of rifle fire from the training range. She sat at her desk, the training plan spread open before her. Every line, every exercise, every hour, all leading toward one moment 6 weeks away. She reached for her pen and began making notes of her own. Adjustments, focus areas, weaknesses to eliminate. The glow of the desk lamp caught the reflection of her uniform badge, faint, steady. Her father's voice returned again, quiet, steady. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's making them wish they'd believed in you sooner. She smiled faintly. Then she went back to work. In every soldier's life, there's a single day that defines the rest. For her, it began with a broken rifle and ended with a purpose. How do you train to beat someone who's never lost? That was the question that lived in Ree Carver's mind long after lights out, long after the last echo of rifle fire faded from the range. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was calculation. A map forming in her mind. 6 weeks, 42 days, 1,000 hours to close a 16-year gap between her and a man whose name had become a legend. Sergeant First Class Brennan. Champion, unbeaten, untouched. And in 6 weeks, her target. Monday morning came cold and dark. The sun hadn't yet burned through the horizon when she stepped onto Range Complex 7, 15 minutes early, her boots crunching over frost-hardened gravel. Floodlights threw long, sharp shadows across the firing line. Targets glimmered faintly at various distances, some at 50 meters, some so far they disappeared into the mist. Technical Sergeant Voss was already there, his jacket collar turned up, clipboard in hand. Beside him stood a man she didn't recognize, taller, older, with the quiet gravity of someone who'd seen too much and still came back for more. Voss looked up when he saw her. "Lieutenant Carver," he said, voice low and gravel thick. "This is Master Sergeant Clayton, Division Shooting Team, 20 years in Special Operations." Clayton extended a hand. His grip was firm, unyielding, eyes sharp and measuring. "Lieutenant," he said, "I heard you embarrassed half the battalion last week." Ree kept her expression neutral. "Just qualified, Master Sergeant." He studied her for a second longer, then nodded. "Good, let's see if you can keep qualifying when the targets start moving." The day began with unknown distance drills. Clayton pointed toward the range, where 4 steel silhouettes stood scattered across the landscape. 5 rounds per target. You'll estimate the distance, adjust your sights manually, and fire. No spotter, no do-overs. Ree dropped to prone, the cold seeping through her uniform. She exhaled, gauging the terrain. Target 1, maybe 100 meters. Target 2, 200. 3, 300. 4, maybe 450. She adjusted for what she thought she knew, fired. Each round cracked through the cold morning air. The metallic echoes faded. Voss checked the impacts through a spotting scope. His face didn't change. Target 1, 4 hits, 1 low. Target 2, 3 hits, 2 right. Target 3, 2 hits, 3 wide. Target 4, 1 hit, 4 misses. 10 hits out of 20. Clayton's voice came steady, not mocking, but it carried weight. 45% accuracy. Brennan averages 75 to 80. Ree nodded once. "Understood." He crossed his arms. "You're calculating everything, thinking too much. Distance, wind, elevation, all one piece of math in your head, but the good ones they don't think they see." He raised his own rifle, aimed, and fired 5 quick shots, all 5 impacts hitting dead center. "That's not instinct," he said quietly. "That's integration. Your brain stops being a calculator and starts being a compass." She absorbed the words, didn't answer, just reloaded. "Again," Clayton said. By noon, she'd fired over 200 rounds. Her shoulder ached from recoil, her hands raw from the cold steel of the magazines. Her accuracy crept up 55%, then 60. Voss made notes quietly beside her. His tone never changed, his voice calm even when her shots missed by feet. "You're improving," he said after the last set, "but improvement won't beat Brennan." Clayton checked his watch. Lunch, 30 minutes. She didn't eat. She just sat polishing her rifle bolt with a cleaning cloth, eyes unfocused. Afternoon training shifted to moving targets. Clayton stood beside a control switch connected to a rail system that carried human-shaped silhouettes across the range at unpredictable speeds. "Real combat doesn't wait for you to breathe," he said. "These won't either." The targets began sliding across the line fast, erratic, weaving. Ree tracked one through her scope, fired, missed by a full meter. "Lead it," Clayton shouted. "You're shooting where it was, not where it's going." She exhaled, steadied again, fired, missed again. Her rhythm fractured, every miss cut deeper than the last. She fired 15 rounds, 3 hits. Clayton didn't yell, he didn't need to. His silence was heavier. "You're chasing ghosts," he said. "Stop reacting, start anticipating." She reloaded, tried again. This time she led the target, imagined where it would be, not where it was. The round hit. Then another and another. By the end of the drill, her hit rate had climbed from 20% to 40%. Still far from enough, but progress. At 1,500 hours, Clayton called a halt. "That's enough for day one. You've hit your learning limit. Any more and you'll just build bad habits." He handed her a dog-eared manual. "Read chapters 4 through 7 tonight. Wind, drift, distance estimation, visual distortion." Ree took it with both hands. "Yes, Master Sergeant." Voss added, "Tomorrow, stress fire scenarios, physical exertion before precision shots, simulated combat, bring water and grit." His eyes softened slightly. "And bring patience. You'll need that more than ammunition." The barracks was quiet that night. Ree sat at her desk, back aching, eyes burning. 300 rounds fired. 45 pages of technical reading. One heavy truth sinking deeper. This wouldn't be a story of talent. It would be a story of endurance. She opened the manual, running a finger over the page margins. Equations, diagrams, drift tables. Her mind absorbed every line like oxygen. Sleep came late and light. By the end of week 1, her hit percentage at unknown distances had climbed to 72. Her arms ached. Her eyes burned from hours of scope work. Master Sergeant Clayton stood behind her as she engaged a line of steel plates. 11 hits out of 15, he said. 73%. He scribbled the number on his clipboard, then looked down at her prone form. "You're approaching Brennan's accuracy, but consistency isn't about numbers. It's about the days you shoot like hell and still perform." Ree ejected her magazine, checked the chamber. "Then I'll need more hell, Master Sergeant." Clayton smirked faintly. "Good answer." Technical Sergeant Voss joined them near the tower, holding a new packet of papers. Official competition format just came through from battalion headquarters. He handed it to her. 5 stages. Unknown distance. Moving targets. Stress fire. Night shooting. Team synchronization. Rescan the last line. Team synchronization. Voss nodded. New event, 2 shooters, separate target arrays, scored on combined accuracy and coordination. She frowned slightly. "Who's my partner?" "Still being decided," Voss said, his tone unreadable. "Major Hayward's choosing from the top performers in your company." He paused. "You'll find out soon enough." That afternoon, moving target drills continued. Clayton increased the target speed, adding erratic motion. Ree fired in rhythm, her movements more fluid now, less thinking, more reacting. Her hit percentage rose to 71%, still short of Brennan's 85. Clayton watched through binoculars. "You're holding too long," he said. "You know your sight picture's good. Pull the trigger before doubt creeps in." She nodded, exhaled, and tried again. Bang, hit. Bang, miss. Bang, hit. Progress, imperfect but measurable. By 1900 hours, The sun had turned red over the horizon. The range glowed gold in the dying light. Voss clapped his hands once. "That's it. Night shooting starts tomorrow, 2100, don't be late." Ree nodded, understood. That evening, she found Keller in the armory. He stood behind the supply cage, his expression unreadable as he cleaned her rifle, the same man who'd once broken her old one. He didn't look up immediately. "Lieutenant, how was day one?" "Educational." He set the bolt carrier aside, inspecting it under the fluorescent light. "I spoke to Major Hayward. He's assigned me to handle your rifle maintenance during training." Ree raised an eyebrow. "You're maintaining my rifle?" "Yes, ma'am." His tone stayed professional. "I'll make sure it performs flawlessly. You focus on the shooting." She hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, Staff Sergeant." Keller looked at her, jaw tight. "For what it's worth," he said, "I want you to beat Brennan. 2nd Battalion's been running their mouths for too long." It wasn't friendship. It was something different, respect earned the hard way. "I'll do my best to represent the battalion well," she said quietly. Night came fast. The air turned cold again, the stars sharp and watchful. At 2100, she returned to Range Complex 7. Floodlights dimmed, the targets barely visible silhouettes. Clayton stood waiting, arms folded. Night vision's mounted. You'll be shooting with 3rd-gen optics. Depth perception's gone. Everything's green. You'll have to trust your body. Ree raised her rifle, peered through the scope. The world turned alien, flat, distorted, colorless. The first shot missed. Second hit low. Third was nowhere near target. By the end of the first set, her accuracy had plummeted to 48%. Clayton's voice came steady, not unkind. "This is your weakness. Brennan scores 75 in night conditions. You're at 50. If you don't fix it, he'll destroy you." Ree's response was quiet but certain. "Then I'll train every night." "Every night. Every night." Voss nodded from the sidelines. "That's the right answer." When she returned to her room after midnight, her hands were shaking. Not from fear, from fatigue. Her shoulder bruised from recoil. Her vision still tinted green. She set her rifle down, exhaled, and whispered to the empty room. 16 years of his experience, 6 weeks of mine. Let's see which matters more. Outside, the wind moved through the training grounds like breath through steel. Skill wins matches, but resilience wins wars. And hers had just begun. Why did her hands tremble when the shooting stopped? Not from weakness, but from everything she refused to feel. 3 weeks into training, and the days had fused into something shapeless. Wake, run, fire, clean, repeat. Hours bled into one another, until time itself felt like another obstacle to overcome. But it wasn't the exhaustion that tested her most, it was the silence. The silence after every shot. The silence before every dawn. The silence inside her own mind when doubt whispered, "You can't beat him." By the 4th week, Ree's accuracy at night had climbed to 71%. Daytime 83. Moving targets 81. Close, so close, but not enough. She studied Brennan's past competition footage, old recordings Voss managed to secure through quiet favors. Watching them was both enlightening and infuriating. Sergeant First Class Brennan didn't just shoot, he orchestrated. Every motion, every transition, every breath was precision disguised as ease. He didn't look like he was trying. He looked inevitable. At Range Complex 7, the routine had grown harsher. Master Sergeant Clayton pushed harder now, his critiques sharper. "Don't reset your stance between shots. Every second counts." Ree steadied herself, adjusted grip, fired again. "Better, but you're still chasing rhythm. Stop thinking about rhythm and be it." Her jaw clenched. She fired 3 more rounds in quick succession. 2 hits, 1 miss. She exhaled, jaw tight, voice calm. Hit ratio, 66%. Clayton nodded once. You're counting too much. You don't trust your instincts. Brennan does. Her answer came steady. Then I'll train mine until they're better than his. That evening, she stayed long after the others had gone. The range lights hummed faintly, the sky bleeding orange into night. Empty brass casings littered the ground like metallic confessions. She lay prone, heart beating slow, deliberate. Sight picture, breath, pressure. Bang. Hit. Again. And again. Until the world around her faded, and all that remained was pulse and recoil. It was close to midnight when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, expecting Voss, maybe Clayton. But it was Keller. He held a thermos in one hand, a range report in the other. Figured you'd still be here, he said, voice low. Voss told me you don't know when to quit. She gave a faint, tired smile. I'm learning. He handed her the thermos, coffee, strong enough to stand a spoon in. Appreciated. He looked out at the distant targets. You're getting better, scary better. Not better enough. Keller's eyes flicked toward her. You will be. You've got something Brennan doesn't. She raised an eyebrow. What's that? Something to prove. She didn't answer, but her silence said everything. The next morning, Major Hayward called for a briefing. Ree stood alongside Voss and Clayton in the command room, the walls covered in maps and training data. Hayward's tone was clipped, efficient. Competition in 2 weeks. Final participant list confirmed. He handed out folders. Inside, scores, team pairings, and event schedules. Ree scanned the page. Her partner assignment was listed halfway down. Her eyes froze. Partner, Staff Sergeant Dwight Keller. The silence in the room thickened instantly. Clayton looked up from his sheet, disbelief flickering across his face. Sir, you're pairing her with Keller. Hayward didn't flinch. I am. Voss exhaled softly through his nose. With respect, sir, their history isn't exactly cooperative. Hayward's tone stayed calm but firm. I know, but Keller's the second highest shooter in the battalion. He's got field experience, combat composure, and a decade of training under pressure. The synchronization event requires total coordination. She needs a partner who can think on his feet. Clayton frowned, or one who doesn't like taking orders. Hayward's gaze hardened slightly. Maybe that's exactly what will make them work. Friction creates precision if it doesn't destroy them first. He turned toward Ree. Lieutenant, do you have an issue with this assignment? She met his eyes squarely. No, sir. Good, then make it work. Outside, the morning sun was blinding. Keller stood by the Humvee, his expression unreadable. So, he said quietly, looks like we're teammates now. Ree adjusted her cap. Seems that way. You're not thrilled. She gave a faint smile. Neither are you. He chuckled once. Fair. Then his tone shifted. But I'll say this, I won't sabotage you, not this time. Her gaze held his. I know. He nodded slowly. Then let's get to work. The next week was chaos. Team synchronization required something she'd never trained for: rhythm with another person. Every motion had to match. Breathing, reloading, target transitions. For someone like Ree, who lived by quiet independence, it was a new kind of battlefield. At first, it was a disaster. They missed timing by seconds, fired out of sync, crossed lines, lost composure. Clayton's voice from the tower cut sharp through the wind. Carver and Keller, your coordination's a mess. You're fighting each other, not the target. Ree exhaled, keeping her voice controlled. Reset. Keller muttered, copy. They reset, fired again. Still out of rhythm. Reset again. For 3 hours they repeated. By the end of the day, both were soaked in sweat and frustration. Keller threw down an empty magazine, muttering, "You breathe too slow." She didn't even look at him. "You shoot too early." "That's timing. That's patience." He glared at her. "You think you're the only one with control. I think you're afraid of losing it." The air went still. For a heartbeat, it looked like he might walk away. Then quietly he said, "You're not wrong." And something shifted. The wall between them cracked, not broken, just cracked. By day 5, their timing had improved. Not perfect, but unified. They spoke less, trusted more. Her calm balanced his aggression. His instinct covered her precision. For the first time, the rounds began hitting in pairs, 2 shots, 1 sound. The tower's loudspeaker broke the silence. Carver and Keller synchronized pair score, 87%. Voss looked up from his clipboard, almost smiling. "That's the highest sync score I've seen in 5 years. Keller turned to her, eyes gleaming with something like pride. "Guess we're not terrible after all." She smiled faintly. "Guess not." But progress came with cost. Ree's body was starting to fail her. Her shoulder was bruised black and purple, her palms raw, her vision blurred at the edges. Sleep came shallow and full of static, fragments of gunfire and shouts that bled into dreams. She began skipping meals, hiding the tremor in her hands. Clayton noticed. He called her aside one evening after range cleanup. "You're burning out." She didn't deny it. "I can rest after the competition." He shook his head. "You keep that mindset, you won't make it to the competition." She looked away. "I don't have a choice." Clayton studied her, then his voice softened. "You always have a choice, but I get it. You're not just trying to win, you're trying to prove something." Her jaw tightened. "Is that wrong?" He sighed. "No, but if you lose yourself doing it, then what's left to prove?" The words hit harder than he probably intended. She didn't answer. That night, she stood alone by the edge of the barracks, staring out at the shooting range, lights flickering in the distance. She thought about the morning she'd stood in that armory, holding a broken rifle and swallowing humiliation. She thought about the silence afterward, how it hadn't been rage she felt, but something colder. Resolve. Now, weeks later, that same resolve was the only thing keeping her upright. Her reflection in the window looked different, sharper, leaner, eyes carrying something unspoken. She whispered to the empty air, "I didn't start this to win. I started it to remember who I was before they told me what I couldn't do." 2 days later, the battalion assembled for a full rehearsal of the competition course. Wind whipped across the open terrain. Dust swirled through the air. Ree and Keller took position side by side at the firing line. Voss's voice echoed through the comms. "This is it, full sequence. Treat it like the real thing." She exhaled. Keller gave a single nod. "Ready. Ready. Begin." The world exploded into motion, targets popping up, dropping, sliding. Their rifles barked in rhythm, bang, 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 2 sounds merging into one. Every reload was instinct, every movement practiced. By the time the last round fired, both stood silent, breathing hard. Voss's voice came through the static. 91% synchronization, new record. Clayton exhaled softly. "That'll win you the event." Keller glanced at her. "Still think we're mismatched?" She allowed a small, tired smile. "Less every day." Later, as the sun bled red across the horizon, Major Hayward arrived at the range. He stood quietly behind them, watching their last few rounds. When they were done, he spoke. "Good work, both of you. The competition's next week. You've exceeded expectations." His gaze lingered on Ree. "Whatever happens next, remember what you already did here. You changed how they see you. That's bigger than any medal." Ree nodded once. "Thank you, sir." Hayward turned to leave but paused. "Oh, Keller." "Sorry." Hayward's voice softened just slightly. Don't let her outshoot you again. The smirk that spread across Keller's face was the first genuine one she'd ever seen from him. No promises, sir. That night, Reese slept deeply for the first time in weeks. No noise. No tension. Just silence, the kind that doesn't haunt but heals. Because sometimes, progress isn't measured in targets hit. It's measured in walls broken. And for the first time since that day in the armory, she didn't feel alone. The ones who break you are rarely the ones who finish you. Sometimes they become the reason you stand taller than ever before. Why did the morning air feel heavier than usual, like even the wind was holding its breath? The competition was set for 900 hours. But by 500, Ree Carver was already awake. She sat at the edge of her bunk, boots laced, uniform immaculate, hands clasped loosely between her knees. The faint hum of the base generators filled the silence, a sound she'd learned to measure time by. Keller was already outside, checking the Humvee. When she stepped into the cold dawn, he looked up and gave a simple nod. Couldn't sleep either. Not really. He smirked faintly. Figures, you're the calmest insomniac I've ever met. She didn't answer, she didn't need to. They drove in silence through the stillness of the base, past the barracks, past the mess hall where steam curled out of exhaust vents, and onto the dirt road that led to Range Complex Alpha, the competition site. As they approached, the quiet began to break. Trucks, command tents, dozens of soldiers gathering. Every unit in the battalion was represented, some watching, some competing. It wasn't just a contest anymore, it was theater. And everyone had come to see the lieutenant who'd humiliated a sergeant, then outshot an entire battalion. The competition consisted of 5 events. Each one brutal. Each one designed to fail even the best. Unknown distance. Moving targets. Stress fire. Night accuracy. Team synchronization. But this wasn't training anymore. Every mistake would be scored, every hesitation amplified. Voss met them at the staging tent. His weathered face gave nothing away, but his tone carried something like pride beneath the gravel. You two ready? Keller answered first, born ready. Ree's reply was quieter, we'll find out. Voss looked between them, then nodded once. Remember what I told you, the first stage isn't about beating the others. It's about surviving your own nerves. Clayton joined them, his clipboard tucked under one arm. And for God's sake, hydrate. It's going to hit 90 degrees before noon. Keller chuckled, you sound like my dad. Clayton's deadpan response landed like a bullet. Your dad probably listened. That earned the faintest smile from Ree. At 900, the horn sounded. The competition began. Stage 1, unknown distance. 6 targets, random intervals from 50 to 600 meters. Shooters had 60 seconds to identify range, adjust elevation, and fire. Brennan went first. The man was calm, frighteningly calm, every movement precise, smooth. 6 shots, 6 perfect hits. Crowd applause followed, low but undeniable. Then came Ree's turn. She took position prone, rifle to shoulder. Wind gusted across the range, a cruel reminder that perfection lived in fractions of seconds. She steadied her breathing. Target 1. Estimate 90 meters. Adjust fire. Hit. Target 2. Wind shifted left. Adjust fire. Hit. She moved through the sequence smooth, measured, deliberate. When the last round fired, silence fell over the field. Voss called the results through the radio. Lieutenant Carver, 6 targets, 5 confirmed hits. A collective murmur swept through the crowd. Brennan smiled faintly, not bad. Keller muttered under his breath, 1 down, 4 to go. Stage 2, moving targets. The rail systems were fast, unforgiving. They mimicked real combat unpredictability, erratic speeds, uneven trajectories. Brennan went first again. 10 targets, 8 hits. Then Ree stepped up. The world narrowed to breath and motion. The metallic clatter of the moving rails, the distant murmur of the crowd, the hot wind, all of it dissolved when she raised the rifle. First target hit. Second miss. Third hit. Her body moved in rhythm, small adjustments, constant corrections. When it ended, she'd hit 8 out of 10. Clayton's quiet voice came through the radio. Tied with Brennan, outstanding work. But Ree didn't smile. She was already thinking of Stage 3. Stage 3 stress fire. Each competitor ran a 200-meter obstacle course, completing push-ups, wall climbs, and gear drags before engaging targets at various ranges. Brennan's run was textbook, controlled chaos. He finished the course in 4 minutes and 17 seconds, 10 shots, 9 hits. Then Ree stepped forward. The world tilted into motion. Her boots pounded the gravel, her lungs burning halfway through the first drag. Sweat stung her eyes. Every step echoed inside her skull. She reached the firing station, dropped prone, and raised the rifle, hands trembling from exertion. She missed the first shot. The second hit. Third hit. By the fifth, her breathing had steadied again. 10 shots, 7 hits. Voss's voice came through the comms. 7 confirmed, strong recovery. Ree rolled to her back, chest heaving, heart hammering against her ribs. Keller crouched nearby, handing her water. Breathe, you're doing fine. She didn't answer, but her eyes said enough. Fine isn't good enough. By late afternoon, the scores were tight. Brennan led by a single point. But the final 2 events could change everything: night accuracy and team synchronization. As dusk fell, the field transformed. Floodlights dimmed. The desert glowed with faint bioluminescence from scattered chem lights marking the lanes. Ree checked her night optic twice, adjusting the reticle brightness. Keller did the same beside her. Night shooting, your weak point, right? He said quietly. Used to be. He smiled faintly. That's what I like to hear. Stage 4, night accuracy. The air cooled as darkness settled. Targets flashed randomly at various ranges, visible for only 3 seconds each. Brennan shot first. 15 rounds, 12 hits. Then it was Ree's turn. She inhaled, the sound of her breath loud in her headset. The darkness felt different tonight, not hostile, not empty, just waiting. The first target flashed. Bang, hit. Second. Bang, hit. Third. Bang, miss. She adjusted her breathing, slowed it, waited for the next flash. By the end of the stage, she'd scored 13 hits out of 15. The field erupted in murmurs. Brennan's lead vanished. Clayton's voice came low over the comms. She's tied for first. Hayward, watching from the command tent, exhaled quietly. Unbelievable. Only one stage remained. Team synchronization. Ree and Keller against Brennan and his teammate, Sergeant Laird. 2 rifles, 2 targets, 1 rhythm. The event was brutal in simplicity. Total synchronization measured by sound, time, and accuracy. The first team to break rhythm would lose points. Brennan's team went first. They fired with a frightening elegance, alternating shots so seamlessly it sounded like one continuous echo. When the buzzer sounded, Voss called the score. 90% synchronization. Then came Ree and Keller. They took their positions. Ree glanced at him. Breathe with me. He nodded. On your exhale. Always. The whistle blew. Bang, bang. Bang, bang. 2 rifles, 1 rhythm. Their movements were nearly telepathic, Each reload, each shift perfectly mirrored. By the halfway mark, the sound of their shots had merged into one pulse, one heartbeat. Clayton's voice over the radio was low and odd. "They're not shooting, they're communicating." The last target dropped. Silence. Then Voss spoke. "Carver and Keller, 94% synchronization. New record." The field erupted in applause. Keller exhaled hard, lowering his rifle. "We did it." Ree nodded once, calm, composed, but her voice shook just slightly. "Yeah, we did." At dusk, all competitors assembled at the review tent. The results were posted one event at a time. Each score, each rank, each total. When the final line appeared, the crowd fell silent. Overall winner, Lieutenant Ree Carver. Second place, Sergeant First Class Brennan. Third, Staff Sergeant Keller. For a long moment, no one moved. Then applause erupted, louder than anything before. Major Hayward stepped forward, microphone in hand. Today wasn't just about competition. It was about precision, endurance, and integrity. "Lieutenant Carver, you demonstrated all three." He paused, looking out over the crowd. "And you reminded this battalion what leadership looks like when it doesn't need to shout." Ree stepped forward, accepting the medal from his hand. It was cold, heavy. But the real weight wasn't metal, it was meaning. Hayward leaned in slightly. "You didn't just win, Lieutenant. You changed a culture." She didn't answer. She just nodded, her eyes glinting under the floodlights. Later, as the crowd thinned and the sun slipped below the horizon, Keller approached her quietly. "You know," he said, "I never thought I'd be proud to lose." She smiled faintly. "Then you're learning too." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You deserved it, Carver, every damn bit of it." Then he turned to walk away, stopping just long enough to add, "Just don't forget who broke that first rifle." She looked at him, eyes soft. "Trust me, Keller, I won't." That night, alone in her quarters, she set the medal on the desk and stared at it in silence. Outside, the wind carried faint echoes of applause. Inside, the air felt still. Her reflection in the window stared back, not prideful, not triumphant, just steady. Because she knew this wasn't about winning. It was about reclaiming something she'd almost lost. Not confidence, not credibility, but self-worth. She whispered to the quiet room, "It's never about the rifle. It's about the hands holding it and what they refuse to let go of." Victory isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the sound of one steady breath after years of silence. Why did the applause fade faster than the echoes of gunfire? The medal still hung around her neck when the adrenaline started to drain. Every cheer, every handshake, every congratulation, it all blurred into something distant. Because victory, she realized, doesn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes it feels like silence after a storm you didn't know you survive. The next morning, the world looked the same, but everything felt different. Lieutenant Ree Carver sat in the mess hall with her tray untouched, the chatter around her low and fractured. Soldiers passed her table, offering quick nods, polite smiles, hushed congratulations. She appreciated them, but it wasn't what she wanted. Respect born from surprise still carried a shadow of doubt. Across the room, she saw Keller with his team. He caught her glance, raised his coffee mug in acknowledgement, then went back to talking. No bitterness, no resentment, just quiet understanding. She smiled faintly, then left her food untouched and headed for the range. By noon, she was back in her element, alone on the firing line. Targets stretched out in rows, paper still fluttering in the late morning breeze. She loaded a fresh magazine, the metallic click echoing like punctuation. She wasn't here to train anymore. She was here to remember. She fired one round. Then another. Each shot landed center. each one quieter than the last. Her breath steadied, her mind cleared. For the first time in months there was no pressure, no competition, no eyes watching. Just her and the rifle, and the sound of everything that had changed. Major Hayward found her there an hour later. He didn't announce himself. He just stood a few paces back, waiting until she finished her magazine. When she lowered the rifle, he finally spoke. "You know, most people would take the day off after something like that." She turned, sweat tracing the line of her jaw. "I'm not most people, sir." He smiled faintly. "No, you're not." He walked closer, stopping beside her. "Your winds made waves, Lieutenant. Division Command called this morning, words spreading across the brigade." Ree blinked once, "Didn't expect that." "Neither did I. Seems they want to meet you." "Meet me?" Hayward nodded. "There's a training detachment at Fort Hood. They're assembling a new precision marksmanship program, mixed gender, small unit tactics. They're asking for you." Ree took that in, expression unreadable. "Temporary assignment." "Initially, but if it fits, could be long-term." She looked out at the targets again, the wind tugging faintly at her uniform sleeves. "And if I say no?" Hayward shrugged lightly. "Then you stay here, keep doing what you're doing, but—" He paused, choosing his words. "Opportunities like this don't come often, and whether you know it or not, you've become a symbol for people who have been told they don't belong." She was quiet for a long time. "Then, when do I leave?" Hayward smiled. "I thought you'd say that." The following week was a blur of paperwork, debriefs and travel orders. Voss and Clayton signed off her training logs with quiet pride. Keller showed up at the armory as she packed her rifle. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "So that's it, huh? You win and now they're shipping you off." She looked up from her gear. "It's an assignment, not exile." He smirked. "Same thing depending on the view." She zipped the case shut, then stood. "You'll do fine without me." "Maybe, but it's gonna be quiet." She smiled faintly. "That's not a bad thing." He pushed off the doorframe, taking a step closer. "Carver, for what it's worth, I meant what I said before. You earned this. You didn't just change minds, you changed me." Her gaze softened. "You don't owe me that, Keller." "Maybe not, but I owe you respect, and you've got it." He extended a hand. She took it firm, steady, no words left to say. The flight to Fort Hood was long and quiet. She watched clouds drift beneath her, the world shrinking into a blur of white and distance. When she landed, she expected standard military reception, a quick handshake, an orientation brief, a bunk assignment. What she got instead was a silent convoy, 2 Humvees, and an officer she didn't recognize waiting at the terminal. "Lieutenant Carver." "Yes, sir." "Follow me." They drove without conversation, miles of Texas scrubland sliding past in golden heat. When the convoy stopped, she saw it, a small, isolated compound surrounded by chain-link fence and warning signs. No unit insignia, no visible name. The officer handed her a folder. "Welcome to Task 17. She opened it. Inside, a single page, classified header, no unit patch. "Precision Engagement Unit," the officer explained. "We're building something new, non-traditional, experimental. You were recommended for your calm under pressure and adaptive training performance." She looked up. "Recommended by who?" He smiled faintly. "Major Hayward." "Of course." He gestured toward the range in the distance. "We'll brief you fully tomorrow. For now, you'll be assigned quarters in Building C. Training starts at 600. "Yes, sir." As he turned to leave, he paused. "Lieutenant, off the record, there aren't many who get pulled into Task 17. Don't waste it." "I won't." Her quarters were small but clean. The window overlooked the range, where silhouettes of shooters practiced under low floodlights. Their movements were silent, coordinated. Different. This wasn't a standard marksmanship program. This was something else. She sat on the edge of the bed, the classified folder still open in her hands. The last line caught her eye. Phase 1. Candidate Evaluation, Psychological Resilience/Moral Control/Precision Stress Response. She exhaled softly, moral control. Whatever that meant, it sounded like more than just shooting. At 600 sharp, she stepped onto the range. A dozen others stood in formation, men and women, all silent, all watching. Each wore plain fatigues with no insignia. A tall woman in her 40s, dark hair, sharp eyes, stepped forward. "Good morning, I'm Colonel Dane. I run this unit." Her tone carried command without volume. "You were all selected for a reason. This program isn't about accuracy. It's about composure under ethical pressure. You'll face simulations that test more than your aim." She paced slowly before them. "In this line of work, you won't always have the luxury of black and white. You'll make decisions in gray, where pulling the trigger might save a life or end the wrong one." Her eyes locked on Ree. "Some of you are here because you shoot well. Some of you because you don't hesitate. We'll find out which you are." Ree felt something stir inside her chest, a quiet recognition that this wasn't the next chapter of her story. It was the test of everything she'd learned so far. Training began immediately. But this wasn't standard marksmanship. They started with cognitive drills, reaction tests, moral dilemma simulations, decision-making under fatigue. Then came live-fire exercises with moving, no-shoot, targets mixed in with armed silhouettes. Mistake one target, and your score dropped to 0. After the first day, her muscles screamed, her mind too. At dinner, she sat alone, exhaustion wrapped around her like a second skin. A fellow trainee, a lean man with close-cut hair and calm eyes, sat across from her. "Carver Wright." She nodded. "Name's Mercer, former recon." He smiled faintly. "Heard about you, the rifle thing, the competition." She raised an eyebrow. "News travels fast. In this community, it travels at bullet speed." She smirked. "Lucky me." He leaned back. "Luck had nothing to do with it. People talk because they respect you. Just be careful. Task 17 isn't about trophies. It's about judgment." "What kind of judgment?" "The kind that gets people sent home, or promoted, or forgotten." He stood, leaving his tray behind. "See you tomorrow, Lieutenant." That night she lay awake in her bunk, staring at the ceiling. The hum of the air system filled the room, steady, rhythmic. Her body was exhausted, her mind was. Because beneath the fatigue, a question pulsed quietly, one she'd never asked before. What if winning wasn't the point? What if the real test began the moment she stopped aiming at targets and started aiming at choices? Outside, under the moonlight, the range lights flickered on again. Somewhere in the distance, a single shot echoed, low, deliberate, haunting. She closed her eyes, whispering softly to herself, "Whatever this is, I'll face it the same way I faced them all, one breath, one trigger, one truth at a time." Every victory invites a new trial. And sometimes, the quietest battlefields are the ones inside your own head. Why do some battles begin without a gunshot? 3 weeks into Task 17, Lieutenant Ree Carver had learned one truth. The real test here wasn't accuracy. It was control. Every day, she faced new drills designed to fracture her certainty. Shooting under sleep deprivation. Shooting while hearing conflicting orders in her headset. Shooting when half the targets looked like civilians. And worse, simulations that blended morality with chaos. The instructors called them decision matrices. The soldiers called them nightmares with consequences. Colonel Dane observed every session with an expression that gave nothing away. She never praised, never criticized. only wrote. After one particularly brutal session, in which Ree had hesitated 1 second too long and lost a simulated hostage, Dane had called her into the observation room. "You performed better than most," the colonel said, "but you hesitated." "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" Ree's voice was calm, "Because I wasn't sure." "About what?" "Whether the shot was clean." Dane studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That hesitation, it's your strength and your weakness." "Yes, ma'am." Dane turned away, her tone quiet but sharp. Task 17 isn't about following orders. It's about surviving the weight of them. You'll learn when hesitation saves lives and when it costs them. Ree left that room changed. Weeks passed. Her aim remained flawless, but her certainty began to erode. During night drills, she'd catch herself second-guessing every shadow. Every enemy target looked too human. Every silence between commands felt like judgment. She didn't talk about it, not to Mercer, not to anyone. Until one evening, he found her alone at the range again, same as always. "You're overtraining," he said, stepping into the dim light. "Overthinking," she corrected. "Same thing." She glanced at him, tired. "You ever wonder what they're really training us for?" He didn't answer right away, just leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. "I've been asking myself that since I got here." And he looked toward the distant targets, barely visible through the dusk. "I think they're trying to find the ones who won't break when the orders stop making sense." Ree exhaled slowly. "Then maybe I'm not the one they're looking for." He smiled faintly. "That's exactly why you are." A week later, the tone of training shifted. No announcements, no warning, just a new schedule pinned to the board. Scenario week, real-time decision evaluations. Colonel Dane addressed the 12 trainees that morning. "You've all proven you can shoot straight. Now we find out if you can see straight. Each of you will enter a live simulation, real environment, real consequences." Someone asked, "Live fire, ma'am?" Dane's eyes narrowed slightly. "Not exactly, but treat it like it is." Her voice lowered. "What happens in these simulations won't leave this compound, ever." Ree's turn came second. They fitted her with a headset, helmet, and HUD-linked optics that displayed mission objectives through augmented overlays. The operator in the control room, a calm voice named Fallen, guided her through the setup. Scenario Alpha 7, hostage extraction, urban structure, 2 hostiles confirmed. Rules of engagement: protect civilian life. Timer starts when you breach. She nodded once, copy. The room around her shifted as the simulation activated, lights changing, walls reconfiguring, digital projectors painting a 3D world across the facility. She was inside a dim apartment. Gunfire crackled faintly outside. Her heartbeat slowed. "Focus. Breathe." 2 rooms ahead, Fallen said in her ear. 1 hostage, 1 armed hostile, clear with precision. Ree moved quietly through the corridor, muzzle low, eyes tracking corners. She spotted the silhouette, weapon raised, shouting at a civilian kneeling on the floor. Her scope centered. Then, before she fired, the man turned. The hostage. He'd grabbed the weapon. 2 figures wrestled, no clear shot. "Command," she whispered. No answer. "Command confirmed. Do I engage?" "Static." The figures struggled, the weapon pointed at her now, trembling. Her instinct screamed shoot. Her conscience whispered wait. 1 heartbeat. 2. Then the man with the weapon broke free and fired. The round hit her shoulder plate, simulated, not lethal. But the mission timer froze. Simulation ended. In the observation room, Colonel Dane stood still, hands clasped behind her back. Fallen reported flatly, target neutralized by hostile, Mission failed. Dane's gaze flicked toward Ree as she removed the headset. You hesitated again. Ree's breathing was still heavy. Yes, ma'am. Why? Because the situation changed. Identification wasn't clear. Dane nodded once, and because of that your hostage died. Ree met her gaze, unflinching. And if I'd fired sooner, I might have killed him myself. The colonel's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes flickered interest, maybe even respect. You're learning, she said softly, just not the lesson you think. That night Ree couldn't sleep. Her shoulder still ached where the simulated impact hit, a phantom reminder of hesitation measured in seconds. She sat by the window, the Texas wind whispering through the cracked blinds. Across the compound, lights still glowed in the control tower. Someone was running more simulations. Mercer appeared at her door, quiet. Couldn't sleep either. No. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed. They ran me through a convoy ambush tonight, gave me an impossible call. What kind of call? He hesitated. Civilians mixed with hostiles. They ordered me to clear the area, but clearing meant casualties. Ree looked up. What you do? He stared at the floor, followed orders. The silence that followed was heavy. Then softly she said, and how did it feel? Like I passed the test. He looked up at her and failed something else. By the end of the week, 6 candidates had washed out. Not for poor accuracy, for poor judgment. Dane called it ethical dissonance. She addressed the remaining 6, Ree among them, with her usual calm tone. Congratulations, you've shown adaptability, restraint, and consistency, but the real test is tomorrow. No rehearsals, no repeats. She paused, letting the silence work. This one won't be simulated. It'll be observed in real time. Someone asked, live mission, ma'am. Dane's response was measured. Real enough. The next day dawned heavy with fog. They boarded unmarked transports, small, silent, unfamiliar. Mercer sat beside her, expression unreadable. You think this is still training? He asked quietly. I stopped asking that 2 weeks ago. The convoy drove for hours before stopping near a decommissioned industrial yard. Dane stood in front of them, her tone low. There's been a security breach. Drone data suggests armed infiltration. You'll clear the facility and secure any sensitive equipment. Her gaze swept the group. This is your evaluation. Your decisions today will decide your place here. Inside the facility, dust and silence hung heavy. Broken glass glittered under beams of light cutting through shattered windows. Ree led her team of 3, Mercer on her left, another trainee on overwatch. The first hour was quiet, too quiet. Then a noise, footsteps, faint, uneven. They advanced, cleared a hallway, cleared a room. Then movement. A man emerged from behind a stack of crates, hands raised, civilian clothing, unarmed. Stop, Ree ordered. Identify yourself. He froze, trembling. I'm maintenance, I work here. Mercer's scope didn't leave him. He's lying, no one's scheduled here. Then he's scared, Ree said. Mercer's voice sharpened, or he's bait. Dane's voice crackled through the comms. Engage only if threat is confirmed. The man took a step forward, desperate, pleading. I swear I'm not armed. Ree saw his hands, empty. But his jacket heavy, too heavy. She lowered her weapon an inch. Sir, I need you to. The explosion was deafening. A flash. A concussive wave. Screams through static. Ree hit the ground, ears ringing. Mercer shouted something she couldn't hear. Smoke filled the corridor. When she looked up, the man was gone, and so was one of her teammates. Hours later, after medevac, after debrief, after the chaos had been contained, She stood outside the command tent, uniform scorched, hands still trembling faintly. Colonel Dane approached quietly. Her voice was low, almost human now. "You made the right call, Lieutenant." Ree turned, eyes hollow. He blew himself up. "Yes." I hesitated again. Dane nodded slowly. "And because you hesitated, only one casualty. The others lived." Ree swallowed hard. "That's not victory, ma'am." "No," Dane said softly. "It's reality." She placed a file in Ree's hand, stamped cleared for operational assignment. "You passed." Ree stared at the paper, then back at her. "I don't feel like I did." Dane's expression was unreadable. "Good. That's how I know you belong here." That night, alone in her quarters, Ree sat at her desk. The hum of the ventilation filled the silence again. On the desk sat the folder. Next to it, her medal. One symbolized recognition. The other, responsibility. She stared at both, her reflection caught in the polished metal surface. Maybe this was what Hayward meant when he said you changed how they see you. He hadn't meant the soldiers. He'd meant the system. The kind that took your humanity, tested it, then asked if you'd still use it. She whispered into the dim light. "I didn't come here to be perfect. I came here to stay human. War doesn't always ask if you can pull the trigger. Sometimes it asks if you still want to. How do you measure victory when it no longer feels like winning?" Weeks had passed since the explosion at the industrial yard, since the day Task 17 stopped feeling like training and started feeling like something else entirely. The team had been reshuffled. Mercer had been reassigned to a medical evaluation unit, nursing shrapnel scars in silence. 2 others had withdrawn voluntarily. Ree Carver remained. Colonel Dane called her into the operations building one gray morning, her voice as even as ever. "Lieutenant," she said, "you've been cleared for live deployment, effective immediately." Ree didn't speak. She just nodded, the motion slow, deliberate. Dane slid a thin file across the desk. No labels, just coordinates and a mission brief. "Recon and Overwatch. Non-engagement unless hostile act is confirmed. You'll be supporting a forward rescue unit in the Al-Mazrah corridor. Limited visibility, urban terrain, no communications delay." Ree studied the file, committing every line to memory. "Single shooter." Dane nodded. "You'll have remote eyes, but you'll be alone on the ground." Ree's hand paused over the edge of the folder. "Why me?" Dane's answer was quiet. "Because hesitation in the right hands can be control, and control is what this mission needs." Ree exhaled slowly. "When do I leave?" 0600, wheels up in 90. By dawn, the aircraft lifted through a cloud-thick sky. The hum of the engines vibrated through the fuselage, steady, cold, almost comforting. Ree sat strapped in near the rear, her rifle secured between her knees. The weapon gleamed under the dull red cabin light. She'd rebuilt it herself over the past few days, part habit, part therapy. Every screw, every polished surface felt like a conversation with her past self. Across from her, a quiet-faced logistics officer spoke into a headset, voice muffled by static. Ree tuned it out. Her world had narrowed again to breath, metal, and distance, the way it always did before a mission. But something was different this time. There was no pride, no thrill, just clarity, the cold kind that comes after all illusions have burned away. The drop zone was silent. She landed under the faint light of dawn, the air heavy with dust and the smell of scorched concrete. The area had seen fighting, not recently, but not long enough for the echoes to fade. Bullet holes traced the walls like forgotten signatures. Windows shattered, doors hanging open, the kind of quiet that didn't feel empty, it felt watchful. Ree set up on an upper floor of a half-collapsed building, rifle mounted, optics steady. She checked her comms. "Overwatch in position," she whispered. "Copy Overwatch," came the voice in her ear. "Rescue team is 2 clicks east, moving to checkpoint Bravo. Maintain visual." "Affirmative." She scanned the streets below, alleys, rooftops, abandoned vehicles. Minutes passed. Then movement. A small convoy, 4 Humvees, crept through the narrow streets, the dust trailing like ghosts behind them. Her rifle tracked ahead of their path, scanning for any sign of danger. Then she saw it. A flash of movement, rooftop, 3 o'clock. A man with a rifle, not aimed yet, just watching. "Command, possible overwatch on roof ahead of convoy," she whispered. "Copy, confirm intent before engagement." Her finger hovered over the trigger guard. She adjusted the scope, magnified the view. The man wasn't uniformed, civilian clothes, no visible insignia. But his posture alert, trained. He raised his rifle slightly, scanning. Ree's breath slowed. She could take him, 1 round, 1 second. "Command, target is aiming." "Static." "Command, confirm engagement authorization." Silence. Then movement below. The convoy slowed. The lead vehicle door opened. A soldier stepped out, unarmored. "An officer." The man on the rooftop shifted his aim. Ree's heart clenched. She had half a second to decide. She didn't think. She saw. She fired. The shot echoed across the ruined street, clean, singular, final. The man collapsed before he ever fired. Then chaos. Gunfire erupted from another direction, rooftops flaring to life with muzzle flashes. Multiple contacts, ambush, someone shouted through comms. Ree repositioned instantly, scanning, adjusting. She fired again. And again. Every shot measured, deliberate. Every decision a weight. The firefight lasted minutes that felt like hours. Then silence. When it was over, the convoy was safe. 3 wounded, none dead. Ree descended the stairwell slowly, rifle slung, heart still hammering in her chest. The team lead, a medic, met her near the vehicles, face streaked with sweat and dust. "You're Carver." "Yes." He nodded once. "You saved our asses. That first shot, if you'd waited, the captain would have been gone." She didn't answer. She just looked past him toward the body on the rooftop. The man she'd shot. Civilian clothes, mid-30s, no visible insignia. His rifle, an old model, could have been insurgent issue, could have been salvaged junk. She knelt beside him, the world narrowing to the sound of her own breathing. His eyes were open. Still empty. Her hand trembled slightly as she closed them. Mercer's words came back to her. "They're trying to find the ones who won't break when the orders stop making sense." And she realized that's what this had been all along. A test. Not of obedience. Of endurance. How much humanity could she lose before she forgot why she fought at all? 3 days later, back at Fort Hood, the debriefing was short. Colonel Dane stood by the observation window, the morning light catching the lines on her face. "Confirmed neutralization, minimal casualties, mission success," she said flatly. Ree sat across from her, silent. "You did what needed to be done," Dane continued. "You kept your head when the situation turned gray." Ree's voice was quiet. He wasn't wearing insignia. Dane met her gaze. "Neither were you." The words landed harder than gunfire. "Do you regret your decision, Lieutenant?" Ree hesitated. Then, truthfully, "I regret the world that made it necessary." For the first time, something softened in Dane's expression. "Then you're still the right kind of soldier." She closed the folder, her tone turning professional again. "Rest for 72 hours, then report back. Task 17 wants you as a full instructor." Re-blinked, instructor. Yes, you'll teach the next class. She stood slowly, and if I say no? Dane's answer came without pause. Then someone else will teach them, someone who might not hesitate. Ree understood. That evening, she walked out to the range alone. The sun was setting, painting the horizon in blood-colored streaks. She set her rifle down gently, then sat beside it, knees drawn up, watching the target sway in the wind. For a long time, she didn't move. Then slowly, she unzipped the case and pulled out the broken carry handle from her old M4, the one Keller had snapped months ago. She'd kept it all this time, a reminder of humiliation, of patience, of how far she'd come. She turned it in her hands, tracing the crack that had started it all. A single act of spite that became the beginning of everything. She smiled faintly, tiredly. Keller, she whispered to the air, you really had no idea. The wind answered softly, brushing the dust across the firing line. She placed the broken piece on the bench beside her rifle. One symbol of the past, one of the present. Then she raised her weapon, aimed at the distant horizon and didn't fire. Because this time, it wasn't about the shot. It was about the silence that followed. When Major Hayward visited months later, she was already running her own range. Task 17 had evolved quieter, more selective, more human. She trained every candidate the same way Voss had trained her, with precision, patience, and an unspoken lesson beneath every drill. One morning, Hayward watched her work, calm, methodical, gentle even in correction. When the session ended, he walked up beside her. You've built something here, he said softly, something worth keeping. She nodded, adjusting her ear protection. They just need to remember what the trigger costs before they ever pull it. Hayward smiled faintly. Still don't like speeches, huh? Never did. He looked out at the targets. You know, when you first showed up, I thought you just wanted to prove yourself. I did. And now? She paused, then said quietly, now I just want to make sure no one else has to. That night, after everyone was gone, she walked to the edge of the field. The stars were sharp above the Texas sky. She closed her eyes, letting the breeze lift the sweat and dust from her face. Somewhere far off, she could still hear echoes of her own story, the snap of a rifle, the laughter in an armory, the silence that followed. And she smiled. Not the smile of someone victorious, but of someone whole. Sometimes the world doesn't reward mercy. Sometimes it questions it. But mercy, real mercy, doesn't need permission. It just needs a steady hand, and the courage not to pull the trigger too soon. The sergeant broke her rifle. She borrowed his. And in doing so, she rebuilt something far more important herself.